6,000 blacks had been rounded up by the mob. Over 800 wounded. 300 African Americans lay dead. Not a single white was ever prosecuted.
You could not keep a people as committed to justice and growth as African Americans in this country in a subordinate status without the threat of violence. Domestic terrorism was the might behind Jim Crow. It was the might behind racial apartheid. Racial apartheid in this country could not be accomplished simply with ideologies. It was reinforced and sustained by terrorism. It created fear. It intimidated people. It was how racial subordination was sustained.
For many Southerners in the 1920s and 30s, lynching was a family affair. Gordon Parks remembers his first lynching when he was 9.
We lived down here about 10 miles from Gainesville and over in Cummings, about 20 miles. And they had this nigger slave cutting wood. Back then we had wood stoves, wood heat with wood. And they left their daughter there, 17-year-old. And she was took a bath and was dressing and got in front of the picture window. And this nigger man was cutting wood, and he took and broke in and raped her and tore her clothes off of her. And then when the parents come home, she told them. They called my grandpa. He was Grand Dragon, and my daddy was he was the wizard, and my daddy was Grand Dragon. And they got about 100 people and went over there, and we went and got him. And grandpa said I could go with him. We went to the house, and these Klansmen got him. We took him down the road, dirt roads then. It ain't paved, wasn't paved then. Took him down there in this big old oak tree, and there's about 200 down there. And they took and set him down, had his hands tied behind him, and Grandpa asked me, told my daddy to let me ask anybody to have anything to say, you know, before they pull him up the tree and hang him. And I asked anybody to have anything to say, and one man said, yeah, I got something to say to him. He opened a big old knife. It had a blade on it that long, I reckon. He took and cut him from year to year, and then they put the rope around his neck and pulled him up in the tree. And we stayed there about an hour. They hung him in the trees to be sure he died before they left.
Lynchings in the South had soared to record numbers. In 1919 alone, over 90 African Americans were lynched, nearly one lynching every 4 days.
This tremendous increase in lynchings after World War I that threatened the ability of the NAACP to be an adequate spokesperson for people of color who were terrorized in many of these communities. And so White and others recognized that lynching had to become more of a priority in the campaign to protect the rights of black people.
Relief from physical terrorism was critical to all of the other rights that people would strive for, the right to vote, the right to protest. I mean, if you risked your very life by doing that, I mean, you're exposed to the possibility of a lynching. That form of terrorism was just brutal for building a movement for civil rights reform in the South.
In the North, in the early 1900s, the anti-lynching crusaders had taken their protests to the streets. In 1922, they would provide major support to the NAACP as the fight against lynching became the NAACP's top priority.
We feel that what we need to do now is to dramatize as highly as possible the whole question of lynching. We have decided to insert in newspapers of wide circulation a full-page advertisement in which we are to put in as startling manner as possible the hell truths about lynching, of which the American public is so woefully ignorant. Walter White.
But while Walter White and the leadership of the NAACP were trying to counteract the complacency of white Americans, one of the founders of the NAACP had a very different idea of how to overcome racial injustice. For W.E.B. Du Bois, editor of his literary magazine, The Crisis, change required the building of a strong, educated African-American community.
Education and work are the levers to uplift the people. Work alone will not do it unless inspired by the right ideals and guided by intelligence. Education must not simply teach work, it must teach life. W.E.B. Du Bois.
To Du Bois, no place was better equipped to train black leaders than his alma mater, Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Established in the 1880s by the American Home Mission Society, it had been for many blacks a way out of the cycle of violence and repression of the South. Fisk had given rise to the first generation of the new Negro.
Fisk in the 20s is considered the #1 black college in America. Students all over are trying to get into Fisk. They were committed to a kind of civil and political equality that challenged traditions, challenged slavery, challenged Jim Crow, challenged the black codes, and so forth. And Fisk represented that whole tradition.
But in 1924, the white president of Fisk, Fayette Avery McKenzie, would begin a fundraising campaign that would place these traditions at risk. To raise $1 million, McKenzie turned to Southern and Northern philanthropists.
He invited the foundations into Fisk. He pretty much said to them that we will change our ways. We will stop agitating for civil and political equality. We will stop agitating against Jim Crow, against racism in the South. We'll make our peace with the South.
McKenzie refused to allow a chapter of the NAACP on campus, and the only version of the crisis that could be found in the university library was censored.
They began to change the Fisk curriculum for the first time. They began to talk about an industrial education program at what was the quintessential liberal arts institution among the black colleges.
In New York, W.E.B. Du Bois, shocked by what he was told, wrote,
"Colored youth must be given a broad vision of truth. My disappointment has continued as charge after charge against Fisk policies reaches me."
For Du Bois, this was a corruption of the ideals and purposes of this institution and the larger objectives of intellectual emancipation of people of color.
As the industrialists became more involved in Fisk University, it was clear that Fisk's most distinguished alumnus was the one person that they didn't like. And so they sort of said to Fisk, separate yourself from Du Bois.
But in 1924, with his daughter graduating from Fisk, Du Bois would get the platform he wanted to make his views known.
Fisk had to invite him back. I mean, he was, without question, their most distinguished alumnus. His daughter was graduating. Everything seemed appropriate. The students wanted him to come back. The alumni wanted him to come back. So they brought him back. They should have known better.
And so Du Bois came, and in that wonderful chapel there at Fisk, Du Bois delivered an address which he called Diuturni Silenti, the Latin of which was borrowed from Cicero's address to the Roman Senate, in which Cicero had said for long years he had been silent, but he would remain silent no longer.
In Fisk today, discipline is choking freedom. Threats are replacing inspiration. Ironclad rules, suspicion, and tale-bearing are almost universal. The Negro race needs colleges. We need them today as never before. But we do not need colleges so much that we can sacrifice the manhood and womanhood of our children to the thoughtlessness of the North or the prejudice of the South. Ultimately, Fisk will and must survive. The spirit of its great founders will renew itself, and it is that spirit once reborn that calls us now. W.E.B. Du Bois.
McKenzie had achieved his goal. Fisk had $1 million endowment, but McKenzie had a rebellion on his hands. The students called for a strike.
They said they were going